In the 1970s, movies weren't just reviewed, they were prosecuted. Censors, governments, and crusaders banned films for blasphemy, obscenity, violence, even suspected murder. Directors faced lawsuits, raids, and shredded reels. Every ban amplified the myth. 10 that terrified censors, now cult immortals. 1. A Clockwork Orange, 1971. Stanley Kubrick knew exactly what he was doing when he turned Anthony Burgess's book into a film, but he probably didn't expect to spend the rest of his career answering questions about it. The movie hit Britain in 1971 and was immediately branded dangerous. Critics called it stylishly sick. The press went into overdrive. Politicians demanded action. But the worst blow was that stories started circulating about crimes supposedly inspired by the film. Teenagers dressing like Alex and his droogs, assaulting people, even singing "Singin' in the Rain" during attacks. The tabloids had a field day, and whether the reports were real or exaggerated didn't matter. The movie itself became a symbol of moral collapse. In the UK, it was technically never banned by the government. Instead, Kubrick himself asked Warner Brothers to pull it from circulation. He and his family were receiving threats, and the pressure became unbearable. That move only made the film more infamous. Suddenly, A Clockwork Orange wasn't just a movie. It was contraband. For nearly 3 decades, Brits could only watch grainy bootlegs smuggled from abroad. Students passed around worn-out VHS tapes like secret evidence. Everyone wanted to see what they weren't allowed to. By the late 90s, after Kubrick's death, the film was finally re-released in the UK. Today, it sits in the pantheon of classics, dissected in college lectures and film retrospectives. But that outlaw period still shapes how people talk about it. Was Kubrick warning about authoritarian control, or was he glamorizing psychopathic violence? Either way, no one denies the impact. It's one of the few films that managed to terrify both governments and audiences in equal measure. 2. The Exorcist, 1973. If A Clockwork Orange was blamed for crime, The Exorcist was blamed for fainting, panic attacks, and religious outrage. William Friedkin directed it like a war film, bombarding audiences with shocks and disturbing imagery that felt designed to break people. By the end of its first screenings, ambulances were literally parked outside theaters to deal with the fallout. Some viewers claimed they felt physically sick, others ran out midway through. Newspapers ran headlines about people collapsing in the aisles. Churches condemned it as blasphemous, with priests warning their congregations that simply watching the movie could be a sin. The Catholic Church wasn't the only one. Across the US and Europe, religious groups protested outside cinemas, handing out leaflets and demanding the film be pulled. Governments responded with bans. In the UK, local councils had the power to stop screenings, and many did.
David Sheehan is with us tonight to talk about a movie that has people passing out in the lobby on their way in or on their way out, David.
Well, you've heard about all those reports about The Exorcist and the trouble it's causing, people fainting and so forth.
Other countries forced heavy cuts. In some places, the entire film was forbidden. None of it stopped the hype. If anything, it supercharged it. People lined up around the block to see what was causing such hysteria. What disturbed censors most wasn't just the demonic possession. It was the way the film treated religion itself. A young girl desecrating a crucifix, vomiting, cursing in a voice that sounded like it came from hell. These weren't just special effects. They were challenges to belief systems that millions of people held sacred. That's why the film still divides viewers. Even today, people recall parents warning them never to watch it, or secret VHS copies being passed around like forbidden fruit. Half a century later, it's still called the scariest movie ever made, and the reputation is deserved. What makes it endure isn't just the shock value, but the cultural scar it left behind. When a film has priests denouncing it from the pulpit, you know it hit a nerve deeper than gore or jump scares ever could. 3. Salò, or The 120 Days of Sodom, 1975. Most films push boundaries. Pasolini's Salò obliterated them. It's one of the rare movies that censors treated not as entertainment, but as something dangerous to society. Based loosely on the writings of the Marquis de Sade, it follows a group of fascist officials who kidnap youths and subject them to unspeakable abuse. Sexual torture, degradation, violence, it piles on without mercy. There's no levity, no escape, just a descent into horror. From the start, authorities across Europe moved against it. In Italy, the film was seized. In the UK, it was banned under obscenity laws and wouldn't see legal release for years. Other countries outlawed it entirely. Even in places where it wasn't technically banned, screenings were rare, usually confined to underground clubs or whispered about midnight showings. For a long time, just saying you'd seen Salò was enough to shock people. Pasolini's murder just before the release fueled its legend. Conspiracy theories swirled that the film had something to do with it, that he'd gone too far and paid the price. The truth is murkier, but the timing guaranteed Salò would always be seen as cursed. Today, on horror forums and Reddit threads, it's called the final boss of disturbing cinema. People confess to turning it off halfway. Others defend it as vital political art. But nobody shrugs at it. It still holds power because it doesn't offer the audience the distance of fiction. It feels like staring into a world where cruelty has no end. That's why it was banned then, and why it still sits in a class of its own now. 4. The Texas Chain Saw Massacre, 1974.
And they scrape all the flesh away from the bone.
Tobe Hooper's low-budget horror was filmed in the blazing Texas heat with a cast and crew who looked like they were barely surviving. That raw, sweaty atmosphere translated to the screen so convincingly that people thought they were watching something more than fiction. Add the blunt title and the buzzing chainsaw, and censors were already on edge before they even saw the full film. What's surprising is how little gore the movie actually shows. Compared to the slashers that came later, it's restrained. But that's exactly why it worked. The screams, the sound of the chainsaw, the dirty farmhouse full of bones. Your mind filled in the rest. Viewers left the theater swearing they had seen gallons of blood. Censorship boards weren't convinced by the technicalities. They didn't care that it wasn't explicit. They cared that it felt explicit. In the UK, it was refused a certificate, which meant no legal screenings. Other countries followed suit. For decades, it survived in bootleg form, whispered about in hushed tones as the movie was so terrifying it had to be banned. By the time it was legally released in the late 90s, it already had mythical status. Fans considered it the pinnacle of horror. Even now, people call it one of the scariest films ever made. What makes it so effective is that it looks cheap, dirty, and real. Like it wasn't staged at all. That authenticity is what terrified audiences and what convinced authorities that it had to be stopped. 5. Pink Flamingos, 1972.
Does blood turn you on?
It does more than turn me on, Mr. Vader. It makes me come.
If you know anything about cult movies, you know John Waters. And if you know John Waters, you know Pink Flamingos. It's the movie that made his name, and it did it by being as filthy as possible. Not fake filthy, actual stomach-turning filth. Divine, the star, literally eats dog crap on camera, and that's just one scene. Waters wanted to make something that wasn't technically illegal, but absolutely should have been. Courts called it obscene again and again. Waters said he lost every case in the 70s. Even having the Museum of Modern Art buy a print didn't help. Censors banned it in multiple countries, and when they didn't, theaters often refused to show it. But midnight screenings kept it alive. The audience didn't just watch it, they endured it, laughed at it, cheered at it. For some, it was disgusting. For others, it was hilarious. For everyone, it was unforgettable. The more courts tried to bury it, the bigger its reputation grew. By the 90s, the Criterion Collection released it, cementing its place in film history. Waters admitted he was inspired by the Manson trial. He always knew the ending would be the dog scene. He wanted it to be the last image burned into the audience's mind. It worked. Even today, Pink Flamingos isn't respectable. That's its strength. Other banned films have been rebranded as masterpieces. Waters' creation stays what it always was, a deliberate provocation. Not everyone can sit through it, but those who do never forget it. 6. The Devils, 1971.
But of course I can prove nothing. This Mother Superior may be little more than a hysterical nun.
Exactly.
Ken Russell didn't do subtle, and The Devils proved it. Based on real 17th century events, the film threw everything at the audience. Possessed nuns, torture, sex, blasphemy, and walls of religious imagery. If you were a censor, it was a nightmare checklist of things to ban. Italy didn't just censor it, they banned it outright and threatened to arrest Russell and the cast if they stepped foot in the country, not metaphorically. Actual jail time was on the table. The UK forced heavy cuts, slicing entire scenes just to get it past the censors. Religious groups lined up to condemn it, and they weren't wrong to think it would offend. Even today, the uncut version is still hard to find. Russell, though, managed to score the Best Director prize at the Venice Film Festival, which only added fuel. Critics debated whether it was genius or heresy. Fans passed around stories of missing footage like it was the holy grail of banned cinema. The most infamous cut? A sequence known as The Rape of Christ, where frenzied nuns desecrate a crucifix. That scene alone was enough to guarantee bans across multiple countries. The British distributor butchered the film to get it released, but even in pieces, it carried a radioactive reputation. It remains one of those movies where the ban is as much a part of its identity as the film itself. 7. Straw Dogs, 1971.
Keep the gun pointing, then he won't get near you.
Sam Peckinpah had already built a reputation as Hollywood's poet of violence. His films like The Wild Bunch set new standards for blood on screen, and critics loved to hate him for it. But Straw Dogs was different. This wasn't about outlaw shootouts or cowboys bleeding in slow motion. This was intimate, ugly, and unsettling in ways that went beyond bullets and gore. The film follows David Sumner, Dustin Hoffman, an American mathematician who moves with his wife Amy, Susan George, to her rural English hometown. He's meek, quiet, bookish, the opposite of the aggressive locals. At first, the tension simmers through subtle confrontations, glares in the pub, unwanted advances toward Amy, menacing laughter. But then comes the assault scene. Amy is raped by one of the villagers, and the way Peckinpah filmed it sparked decades of outrage. Some critics argued the camera framed it ambiguously, blurring lines between consent and violence. Women's groups said it wasn't just offensive, but dangerous, suggesting that assault could somehow be half-wanted. Censors didn't hesitate. In the UK, the film was prosecuted for obscenity, an almost unheard-of move for a Hollywood thriller. Courtrooms that usually dealt with adult magazines and underground smut suddenly had Straw Dogs reels on the table. The obscenity battle didn't kill the movie. Instead, it lived a second life on VHS. But those tapes were never safe. Police raids seized copies. Distributors hacked scenes out. Some countries demanded entire reels be cut before release. Even then, arguments raged among critics and fans. Was Peckinpah exposing toxic masculinity and social decay, or was he reveling in it? Was it art or exploitation? In the decades since, the debate hasn't cooled. Academics now write about it as a study of masculinity, repression, and the thin line between civilization and savagery. Others still call it unforgivable. Peckinpah never apologized, never clarified. Maybe that's why the film still stings. It offers no comfort, no answers, just raw violence and the uncomfortable sense that the line between civilized and animal is paper thin. For the 70s audience, it wasn't just shocking. It was radioactive. And the courtroom battles around it proved that Peckinpah hadn't just made another violent thriller. He had made something governments wanted erased. 8. Cannibal Holocaust, 1979.
If I were in New York right now, I'd probably be out shopping.
If there's one movie that defines banned film, this is it. Ruggero Deodato's Cannibal Holocaust wasn't just banned, it got its director arrested. When the film premiered in Italy, police stormed the theater, seized the reels, and accused Deodato of making a snuff film. Why? Because the movie looked too real. Shot in a pseudo-documentary style, it followed a group of filmmakers traveling into the Amazon, only to vanish while filming a so-called primitive tribe. Later, their footage is discovered, showing shocking violence, cannibalism, torture, executions. The special effects were so convincing that prosecutors believed actual murders had been filmed. Deodato had to drag his actors into court to prove they were alive. One even broke a contract of silence just to show up and save him from prison. That cleared the murder charges, but not the animal cruelty. Unlike the human violence, which was fake, the killings of animals on camera were real. Turtles, monkeys, pigs, slaughtered for shock value. That was enough for countries around the world to ban it outright. The UK lumped it into the video nasties panic of the 1980s. Authorities seized VHS tapes from rental shops. Australia slapped an outright ban that lasted decades. Other countries demanded entire reels be cut, leaving butchered versions that made little sense, but even those edits couldn't strip away its reputation. For horror fans, Cannibal Holocaust became the forbidden grail. Bootlegs circulated like whispered secrets, often in dingy video stores where clerks warned customers what they were holding. When the internet came along, grainy clips popped up in forums, fueling its legend. Some hailed it as genius, a brutal critique of Western exploitation of indigenous cultures and the media's thirst for sensationalism. Others dismissed it as indefensible garbage. Even now, the split remains. On one side, defenders argue it pioneered found footage decades before the Blair Witch Project. On the other, critics point to the animal cruelty and ask, does shock value justify actual suffering? That unresolved question is why the movie hasn't faded. It didn't just challenge censors, it forced audiences to confront where they draw their own line. 9. Ilsa, She-Wolf of the SS, 1975.
You are blonde.
I was born in Germany.
If Cannibal Holocaust blurred the line between reality and fiction, Ilsa, She-Wolf of the SS didn't bother pretending. It was exploitation, pure and simple. A Canadian-made shocker dressed up as a Nazi camp drama. It mixed explicit sex, torture, and violence into something designed to provoke outrage. The premise is as lurid as the title. Ilsa, played by Diane Thorne, is a sadistic commandant running medical experiments on prisoners. The film revels in its brutality, combining nudity with torture in a way that guaranteed both controversy and notoriety. From the start, critics dismissed it as obscene, and censors agreed. In Germany, it was banned outright, not just censored, but completely forbidden. In the UK, it was denied a certificate, meaning it couldn't be legally shown at all. Other countries followed suit, treating it as pornography masquerading as history. Unlike The Exorcist or A Clockwork Orange, there was no high-minded defense, no claims of symbolism or artistic intent. It was what it looked like, sexploitation draped in Nazi uniforms. And yet, it didn't vanish. Fans hunted it down through bootlegs, VHS swaps, and underground screenings. It spawned sequels: Ilsa, Harem Keeper of the Oil Sheiks, Ilsa, the Tigress of Siberia, each recycling the same formula in a new setting. None were better, but all found an audience. For collectors, owning an Ilsa tape became a badge of honor, proof you'd gone deeper into the exploitation rabbit hole than most. On Reddit and horror forums, the film is still a touchstone. Some fans talk about it as so bad it's good, a relic of 70s trash cinema. Others call it indefensible, pointing out how it trivializes real historical horrors for cheap shock. Even hardcore horror buffs sometimes admit they won't defend it. The bans gave it a strange kind of power. Without censorship, it might have faded into obscurity, another low-budget oddity. Instead, the outrage kept it alive. People wanted to see what was so dangerous, so offensive, that entire countries wouldn't allow it. That curiosity is why Ilsa endures. Not as a respected classic, but as a notorious example of how far exploitation cinema was willing to go. 10. I Spit on Your Grave, 1978. Also released as Day of the Woman, this low-budget revenge film caused some of the most intense censorship battles of the 70s. The story is simple. A woman is brutally assaulted by a group of men, then hunts them down one by one for revenge. But the execution was anything but simple. The assault scenes were drawn out, graphic, and deeply unsettling. Censors called it obscene. Feminist critics denounced it as exploitative. Even Roger Ebert, usually level-headed about horror, gave it one of his most scathing reviews ever. In the UK, the film was outright banned. When VHS tapes circulated in the 80s, they were seized under the Video Nasties laws. Supporters argued it was a feminist revenge fantasy. Detractors said it was nothing but pornography dressed as horror. That split has never really healed. Even today, discussions about it online quickly turn into debates about exploitation versus empowerment. What can't be denied is the impact. Like Straw Dogs, it was prosecuted, censored, and banned around the world. But also like Straw Dogs, it survived because the controversy gave it a reputation. Students passed it around in college dorms. Horror fans hunted for bootlegs. By the 90s, it was a cult title. By the 2000s, it had been remade. It went from courtroom exhibit to pop culture touchstone, all because of the firestorm it caused in the late 70s. And that's our trip through 10 banned 1970s movies that rattled the world. These weren't just films. They were cultural earthquakes that scared censors, divided audiences, and rewrote the rules of cinema. Love them or hate them, their shockwaves are still felt today. Which of these wild stories surprised you most? Drop your thoughts below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more untold movie history.